When soldiers posed for a group photo in 1903, they had no idea that a century later, researchers would zoom in on their faces and uncover something that would shake the historical community, changing our understanding of military photography. The heavy wooden door of the GMA History Museum creaked open as Maria Petro hurried in, struggling with a large cardboard box. Rain dripped from her coat onto the polished floor as she set the box down. "I found it," she called out, her voice echoing through the quiet hall. "The original Sex Regiment photograph. It was in the basement archives all this time." The museum director rushed over, eyebrows raised in disbelief. For months, they'd been preparing an exhibition on the Imperial Guard, but the centerpiece, a legendary photograph showing over 1,000 soldiers in perfect formation, had been missing. Now, just a day before the exhibition was set to open, Maria had uncovered it in an old storage room. With trembling hands, they carefully removed the photograph from its protective covering. Even after more than 100 years, the image was remarkably clear. 1,250 guardsmen arranged in 25 neat rows, each face distinct and recognizable despite the massive scale. "This can't be real," the director whispered, adjusting his glasses. Cameras in 1903 weren't this advanced. Maria leaned closer, scrutinizing the faces of the soldiers. "Look at how sharp everything is. You can even see..." She paused, squinting at the foreground. "Are those cigarette butts in the grass?" The director pulled out a magnifying glass and confirmed her observation. There, scattered among the blades of grass in front of the first row of soldiers, were tiny cigarette butts, perfectly captured by a camera that, by all historical accounts, shouldn't have been capable of such fine detail. "We need to get this digitized immediately," the director said, already reaching for his phone. "There's something extraordinary about this photograph." Little did they know, this discovery would spark a research project that would shock historians and photography experts worldwide. The soldiers who had posed for this photo in 1903 had left behind a mystery, one that wouldn't be unraveled until a century later. 3 days later, the museum's small digitization lab was buzzing with activity. Alexei, a young scanning technician, had been working non-stop to scan the massive photograph. The negative was huge, 11 by 60 centimeters, far larger than most early 20th century photos. "This is unbelievable," Alexei said, pointing to his computer screen, where he'd zoomed in on a section of the image. "I can see individual buttons on their uniforms, the decorations, even the expressions on their faces. This kind of resolution shouldn't be possible with century-old technology." Maria nodded, equally amazed. "Can we find out anything about how this photograph was taken?" "Only what's written on the back," Alexei replied, carefully turning the original over. "It says it was taken in 1903, showing the full strength of the Sex Hall Lifeguards Regiment. The negative size is noted, but there's no information about the camera or photographer." News of the remarkable photograph spread quickly. Within weeks, researchers from Moscow, Berlin, and London arrived, eager to study it. Dr. Andrei Vulov, a leading expert in historical photography from Moscow University, led the team. As he examined the image, he frowned. "You see why this is strange, right?" he asked Maria. In 1903, cameras weren't this advanced. Most glass plate negatives were small, and lenses weren't sharp enough to capture such a large group with this much detail. It should have been impossible. But the evidence was right before their eyes. As the team set up high-powered digital equipment to analyze every inch of the photograph, their skepticism turned to excitement. Not only was every face clearly visible, but they could also see details that should have been lost to the limitations of early photography. "Look at this soldier here," said Dr. Emma Richardson, the imaging expert from London. She pointed to a man in the middle rows whose cheeks appeared slightly puffed out. "It's almost like he's holding his breath." The mystery deepened when an elderly visitor recognized that soldier. Victor Mayeni, a 78-year-old local resident, had come to see the exhibition after reading about it in the newspaper. When he saw the famous photograph, he immediately asked to speak with the researchers. "My grandfather is in that picture," he told them, his eyes bright with excitement. "His name was Fedos Karotki. He used to tell me stories about the day this photograph was taken." "According to my grandfather," Victor began, "this photograph was taken for the regiment commander's retirement. They spent an entire day preparing for it. My grandfather even lit a cigarette while standing on the scaffolding. And when the command came, he held the cigarette in his fist, but didn't have time to exhale. That's why his cheeks are puffed out in the photograph. Dr. Vulov zoomed in on the image, focusing on Fedos Karotki's face. The story matched perfectly. A young soldier with cheeks noticeably puffed out, as though holding his breath. "Did your grandfather ever mention the camera they used?" asked Dr. Richardson. Victor paused, his wrinkled face scrunching in thought. "He said they built tall scaffolding for the photographer. The camera was huge. He described it as being as big as a small car with a lens like a dinner plate." This revelation excited the research team. A camera with such a large lens in 1903 would have been a groundbreaking development. There's more," Victor added. "My grandfather mentioned that they spent hours positioning every soldier. The photographer was incredibly particular, obsessing over every little detail. Some of the men joked he was stricter than their commanding officers." As the investigation continued, the team made another startling discovery. While examining the background of the photograph, beyond the rows of soldiers, they noticed something unusual: surveying equipment. "This is interesting," Dr. Vulov murmured, enhancing the image. "Why would there be surveying equipment at a regimental photograph?" This question led them down a new avenue of inquiry. Searching through historical archives, they found scattered references to a secret optical research division within the Imperial Russian military, one that had been developing advanced photography equipment for reconnaissance purposes. "What if the regimental photograph was just a cover?" suggested Dr. Heinrich Meyer, the historian from Berlin. "What if its real purpose was to test new military technology for aerial reconnaissance?" The theory gained credibility when they uncovered a vague mention in a 1904 military journal about experimental optical equipment being field tested at the Sexhall Regiment headquarters. The timing aligned perfectly with the photograph. Meanwhile, Maria had become deeply intrigued by the soldiers themselves. Using the photograph's incredible detail, she began identifying individual soldiers and tracing their life stories through military records. The Sexhall Lifeguards Regiment had a long and distinguished history. According to a caption they found beneath a copy of the photograph in another museum, the Lifeguards Regiment of the Austrian Emperor was founded in 1710 by Emperor Peter I. Since its founding, the regiment had participated in 20 wars, been stationed in 50 different locations, and visited countries across Europe and Asia, including Sweden, Persia, Turkey, Germany, and England. With Victor's help, Maria was able to track down the descendants of several soldiers from the photograph. Each family had their own stories, passed down through generations, about the day the regiment posed together. One family shared letters from their great-grandfather, detailing how the photographer had spent hours arranging the regiment, demanding absolute stillness for the perfect shot. Another brought in a pocket watch that had been given to their ancestor that day, visible in his hand in the photograph when zoomed in close enough. The most touching story came from an elderly woman named Anastasia, who recognized her grandfather in the front row. "He always said it was the proudest day of his life," she told Maria, her eyes welling up. "Not because of the photograph, but because it was the day he was promoted for acts of bravery." When they zoomed in on her grandfather's uniform, they saw the freshly pinned medal, one that hadn't appeared in the regiment's official records. Further evidence of the photograph's exceptional historical value. As news of these discoveries spread, the GMO Museum experienced an unprecedented surge in visitors. People traveled from across the country and beyond to see the remarkable photograph and learn about the soldiers who had posed together more than a century ago. Rumors spread that the camera still existed and was preserved in a military museum in Russia. The team found a blurry old photograph that might have shown the mysterious camera, but they couldn't confirm its authenticity. As the team published their findings in major academic journals, the Sexhall Regiment photograph became world famous. People began calling it the impossible photograph, a forgotten piece of history rediscovered when researchers zoomed in and saw something no one expected. The GMO Museum was forever transformed by this discovery. What had once been a quiet local institution became an international destination. The museum expanded, creating a special exhibition hall dedicated entirely to the photograph and the stories of the soldiers it contained. The photograph continued to yield new discoveries. Historians were able to reconstruct the fates of many officers depicted in it. Many of them went on to have illustrious military careers, leaving their mark on history. The regiment itself had an impressive legacy, having participated in 20 wars and traveled across Europe and beyond. What do you think about this incredible photographic discovery? Have you ever found unexpected details when looking closely at old family photographs? Let us know in the comments below.